All right. Let's talk about this last story here. This is not fun. Someone's dead, but it's a story nonetheless here. So the woman you see on the screen, this is a composite of a missing person. Well, an unidentified person, a Jane Doe in a murder from 40 plus years ago, right? Now you may be asking yourself, why am I talking about an unsolved murder? That doesn't happen here much on this channel, but well, because it's really interesting. Stephen King's son believes that Jaws might contain a clue into solving one of America's most famous cold cases. Yeah, Stephen King's son apparently is on this train of thinking that somewhere in the movie Jaws, it contains information about a woman's death from a long time ago. Now, it says here, as evidenced by books like Horns, Heart-Shaped Box, and The Fireman, Joe Hill, son of Stephen King, has become a superb horror writer in his own right. And now, thanks to a renewed interest in a 2015 theory he first published online, he's also angling to prove himself as a real-life murder mystery detective. And let's be fair here. I think deep down inside, every writer wants to eventually solve a murder. Lord knows I do. Just putting that out into the universe. Let me solve a murder. Anyone? All right, no? Let me talk about murder then. Okay. So it says, Hill's a lifelong fan of Jaws, and as recently recounted by both the Washington Post and Esquire, in 2015, he took his 3 sons to see a 40th anniversary screening of Steven Spielberg's 1975 classic. Along with Roy Scheider's great lead performance and some legendary scares, Hill, whose full name is Joseph Hillstrom King, saw something truly eye-opening that evening. A female extra who eerily matched the description of a woman who was murdered in the same summer that Spielberg's film was produced. The victim, known as the Lady of the Dunes, was discovered in July 1974 in the beachy dunes outside Provincetown, Massachusetts, approximately 100 miles from where Spielberg shot Jaws in Martha's Vineyard. Never identified by police, this enigmatic woman has remained at the center of one of America's great cold cases, and Hill, who had recently read about the Lady of the Dunes and Deborah Halber's The Skeleton Crew, how amateur sleuths are solving America's coldest cases, soon became convinced that the anonymous actress he'd spied in a large disembarking ferry crowd scene might in fact be the slain woman. Writing on Tumblr, come on. Well, to be fair, he wrote this 3 years ago in 2015. So writing on Tumblr kind of makes sense. It says, writing on Tumblr, with the aid of above comparison between Jaws' frame grab and a composite recreation of the Lady of the Dunes' face, Hill explained what made him think he'd found a possible match. Both were somewhere between the ages of 25 and 49, both weighed about 145 pounds, and both wore a blue bandana. Though the Jaws figure wasn't specifically seen in Wrangler jeans, which is what the Lady of the Dunes was wearing when her body was discovered, he opined that it stood to reason that a young 1970s woman might very well own more than one pair of denim jeans. He says here in his post, "Now I understand that I'd only finished reading The Skeleton Crew a few weeks before. The Lady of the Dunes is in many ways the centerpiece of that book, and unlike other crimes that Mrs. Halber explores, it remains infuriatingly unsolved. After finishing the book, I had spent a few minutes online acquainting myself with the latest details and studying the recreation of the lady's face, and now suddenly, impossibly, there she was, life-size and looking over her shoulder at me, there for a moment in a busy crowd scene, and then she was gone." Now, it's a very, very, very interesting theory. Right? It's a very interesting theory because it's entirely possible that it could be accurate. Now, he understands that this post of his, which has since gone viral, ultimately may not amount to much. And he may have been influenced by the Skeleton Crew. He may have been influenced by everything else that was going through his head at the time. But ultimately, this woman was found like she was brutally killed. Right? Like, I think half of her head was almost cut off with a shovel. Like, it was almost decapitated with like a shovel or something. She was brutally killed 100 miles away from where this movie was being filmed at the time it was being filmed at. And here's the big problem though, is getting their hands on the extras information, getting their hands on that type of stuff from the production of Jaws is probably going to be impossible. The movie is 43 years old. Getting their hands on that is probably slim to none. But one of the coolest things about this story going viral, and this is actually one of the things that happens quite often in regards to these type of cold cases, is all it takes is people to talk about it, to showcase it, and maybe, just maybe, we might actually find somebody out there who knows something, who has seen something, who is able to actually to go, hey, no, either this is me or I know who that is, and she's been missing all this time, but we never put two and two together. If the single frame on Jaws actually happens to house the remains of the woman, I'm just going to bring this up here. If it actually happens to be the woman in question, and Joe freaking Hill, Stephen King's son, is able to solve this literal 44-year-old murder, that is going to be something that is truly insane, truly amazing, and just so the internet in 2018 and how Cold Case Files goes. Now, like I've said, I very much wanted to start investigating cold cases and whatnot because they're interesting. But this story to me is absolutely fascinating. And while probably, and I'll be open to admit, probably improbable or improbable in terms of this being the conclusion, renewed interest in cases like these oftentimes get people to come out who may not have known that they saw something and then admit that they did. And that's ultimately what we're looking for here, to bring justice to a woman who was brutally beaten, unidentified, left as a Jane Doe for nearly a half century. So I'm all for this case being solved. And if it is the woman that is from Jaws, that's insane. And if not, let's just find out who she is so we can finally, truly lay her to rest.